in my sky is blue, the sea is red, forest has burned, creature like that. We feel afraid, think we're high, we succeed, it's a lie. Let's make a wish, let's have a kiss, and say goodbye. We've moved the door, we've thrown the switch, so now we run, incinerate. Let's make a kiss, let's make a wish, let's have a kiss, and say goodbye.
We're listening to Glenn Love from Glenn Love's Bandcamp page, glenlove.bandcamp.com. That's Glenn with 2 N's, by the way. Glenn Love is an electronic industrial artist living in Toronto, although I know he comes from Cambridge. And he signed to Sonic X Records in Leipzig, Germany. His previous releases include Cool Update, Utopia, Belle Epoque, and Cryptothesia. Glenn has toured extensively across Canada and Europe, performing at major industrial festivals. Hope he comes out to our industrial festival, taking place at Bingaman's sometime in the summer. I think in a couple of weeks, actually. That's Glenn Love. We'll hear some more of Glenn Love in a little bit. In the studio with me today, I have Kate Klassen. Hello, Kate.
Hello.
You are from Spectrum, which is just upstairs. As I was walking in the studio today, happened to pop my head into your office there and asked if you could come and talk about the Tri-Pride Festival. So,
got lucky that we were there because we're not usually open in the mornings.
Well, it's a good day for me.
It's a good day.
So coming up this weekend is the big music festival, but it's Pride Week, so something's been going on all week long.
Yeah, we've got well, I mean, we always have our regular programs running all week, but yeah, we're looking forward to Pride Day. It's going to be a nice day. It's always a good fun day, good family day.
I see that there are Pride 2019 items in your events calendar starting as early as last week Tuesday on the 22nd.
Right. Actually, Pride is a different organization.
Oh, it's not Spectrum?
No. Tri-Pride is a different organization. They handle it completely separately.
Oh, didn't realize that. I thought that it was operated
totally
out
separate.
Okay, so but you're involved in both organizations?
No, actually, I was involved in Pride back when it very first started in 1995, when we had the first Pride in City Hall with 86 people showing up
86 people
in the rotunda at City Hall.
Oh my goodness, I think you've got that many people in the organizing group now. So.
Yeah, it's grown somewhat.
Yeah. And the Pride Festival, the actual music festival, the thing that we all know as the Pride Festival, is taking place in Victoria Park.
On the Common, yep.
Yeah. What starts what time?
12 o'clock.
12 o'clock on a Saturday. This is Saturday, June the 1st.
Saturday the 1st. Yeah. There's also a picnic on Sunday on Ruse Island.
Okay.
Bring your own food and stuff. But that'll be going on for families and people who want to go on Sunday.
Somebody wants to have a picnic in the park. That's
Exactly.
the island is a lovely place.
It is.
I like it there. Any idea what the lineup is on the festival day?
Not a clue.
No,
Not a clue. No.
So you have to go out there and
Just go out and find out
listen to what's
what
happening.
people are doing. Yeah, it's a great festival, and I'm sure they'll have some great performers.
Yeah, they usually do.
Yeah.
I was there last year. Last year, I was there as a member of the Green Party. Got a chance to go on stage and say 2 cents worth of political stuff.
Sure.
It is a lot of fun going up there.
It is.
Everybody there is just enthusiastic and out there for a nice time.
Well, yeah, I mean, because for our community, it's one of the few days in the year where we're not the outsiders.
I suppose that's true.
So it's a kind of a rare occasion for our community to come together, which is it's fun and exciting.
Do you know if there's a lot of resistance to that? I hear that in the political circles, there's a lot of action against same-sex marriage, against just people loving each other.
Yeah, against trans people too. It's been challenging. Certainly with recent events in political situations and so on.
Yeah. I see that there are activities like yoga in the park taking place. There's a dance at 9:00 in the evening.
Oh, is there?
Yeah, says here on the try-pride.ca events listing. It says join Queer Night Out at our annual Pride Dance at the Crown Plaza Hotel in downtown Kitchener, and enter through the main entrance. Ballroom is on the second floor. Early bird tickets are $7.50, and there's a limited number available. So
I had no idea. That sounds exciting.
Yeah, it does sound like fun. And on the Sunday, June the 2nd, there's a Tri-Pride March starting at 11:00 from Kitchener City Hall. And I guess that goes down to Victoria Park.
Yeah, I'm wondering how they're going to do that. Isn't Galco Street closed?
Yeah, it is. It says on the events page, meet us at Kitchener City Hall at 11 a.m. and let's show our pride as we march down to Victoria Park. The route is being revised due to construction, and that's not just construction, but the entire street is blocked off,
closed.
We encourage you to dress in pride colors and dress up your bikes, strollers, etc. So yeah, that should be fun. Good for pictures.
Go to the picnic and then enjoy the picnic.
And enjoy the picnic, yeah. So I understand that the island has no electricity on there, no barbecues, nothing like that. So it has to be a cold picnic lunch or something in well-working thermoses. Yeah, so there's a picnic. What else is happening? The Rainbow Chorus Cambridge concert, To the Moon and Back. It's taking place at 2 p.m. at the Harcourt Memorial United Church.
Cool.
87 Dean Avenue. The events listing says To the Moon and Back will include songs of celestial celebration, Moon Dance Underneath the Stars, and Sure on This Shining Night and Fly Me to the Moon are just some of the great songs the chorus will perform at the spring concert. Guest performer, James Gordon.
Wonderful.
More political involvement. James is the councillor in Guelph. $20 there, and again, I expect tickets are limited, so go to the try-pride.ca website and get those tickets. I happened to come across you in the Spectrum office.
Yes.
What does Spectrum do?
We're a community center for the LGBT community. We basically function as a community center. We have programs that run most nights of the week, trans peer support groups. We have games night on Friday nights. We have drop-in hours a few times a week. Various groups. We have a group for older adults. We have a group for youth. So just basically community center stuff, serving as a place for the community to gather, because we don't have anywhere else in the town to gather. There's no gay bars anymore. There's no cafes or anything like that. So this is it.
So what happened there? All these venues closing themselves off.
I'm not really sure what happened. I know that Club Renaissance was owned for quite a number of years over on Charles Street, right across from the bus terminal. Club Renaissance was there for a long time, and it closed 4 or 5 years ago. Okay. So, and it was the last gay bar in town. And this is happening all over the place, partly because young people don't feel the need as much to go to gay bars.
So this is maybe a good sign of inclusion.
It can be, yeah. I mean, it's not great from the point of view of our older community members, because they are not comfortable, say, going to a straight bar and dancing with another same-sex couple kind of thing.
Right.
But it's definitely improved for the younger crowds, and they're not as shy about being themselves in a regular bar.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that's great. I'm looking at your calendar of events.
yes.
Man, is that packed.
Yeah, we tend to keep a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah, the online calendar for Spectrum is at ourspectrum.com. Looking just at Tuesday, tomorrow, 12 o'clock, there's the Spectrum Tuesday drop-in.
Yep.
7 p.m., the Waterloo, Wellington, Perth PF Flag parents.
P-Flag, yeah.
P-Flag. Oh, P-Flag, yes.
Yeah.
Parents, family, and friends peer support group. Wednesday, Spectrum Converse and Connect. Sorry,
Yeah.
Converse. I'm thinking tennis shoes.
Yeah.
Spectrum Thursday night drop-in. Day 5 games on Friday. What's that?
Yeah, just game night. We have a bunch of games. We have a bunch of puzzles. People come home and they play and have fun all night from 7 till
cool.
11 or whenever it closes.
Cool. Got a nice little library up there too.
We do. We have a nice library of books and of DVDs. When Gen X closed, the video store up in Waterloo, they gave us their collection of gay and lesbian movies.
Oh.
So we have something like 200.
Okay.
So,
and do you have movie nights to?
We haven't yet, but we're looking at it.
Okay. Not a big space there for.
It isn't. We've got a projector, and there's a nice big clear wall on the one side, so we've got room to show films. We've done that before.
Okay. Excellent. Let's listen to a little bit more music.
Sure.
You said 80s dance music.
Yeah.
Is that your thing?
It was when I was back in the day. Yeah.
Back when it was the 80s.
Yes.
Absolutely. So we moved on to Geneviève Racette from her album No Water, No Flowers. This is In Your Arms.
You're all I have. It's bittersweet. You always sweep me off my feet. So I never let my guard down until I am safe and sound. No, I never let my guard down until I am safe and sound. In your arms, in your arms, in your arms, in your arms, Mille fois par jour, tes yeux peuplés de souvenirs, tes yeux forêt profonde, forêt sauvage. Mille fois la tombée de la nuit. Mille fois par jour, ta bouche, tes lèvres, un précipice. Ta bouche qui me donne le vertige. grand canyon. Mille fois la chute de t'aimer. Oh, 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 oh. Mille fois par jour tes bras, ton corps grand ouvert, ton corps où plongé comme dans la mer, son va-et-vient. Mille fois l'envie de m'y noyer. Mille fois par jour ta voix qui ne me répond plus. Ta voix triste écho d'une langue morte à bout de mots. Mille fois ta voix dans le silence.
Geneviève Rossette from Montreal. Geneviève writes, "This new album means so much to me. It truly represents who I am, coming from such a long line of bilingual families. My vision with this record is to bring positivity to bilingualism. My whole life I was careful not to offend anyone with my bilingualism in concerts and in day-to-day life. I am done hiding that part of myself. I will embrace it instead." Geneviève from Montreal, Geneviève Rossette. We have some more music by her, possibly to be played later, possibly to be played next week. Just talking to Tim Lewis, who's in the studio with us. Hi, Tim. And Kate Glasson is in the studio with us too. That we get so much new music every week, we can't possibly play it all. So for those artists who want to submit music, send it to office@radiowaterloo.ca. Include the MP3 files or the complete set of metadata if you can. Or send it to us in a link on a Dropbox or something that does not require a login or any other strange machinations that makes it difficult for us to get the music. There's enough other music out there that if you make it difficult, sadly, your music is not going to be at the top of the pile. So, Kate, anything else you can tell us about Spectrum? What is up in Spectrum?
That's my question. Really, I don't know that there's much else to say. We're a community center. We sustain ourselves by donations. So anybody who wants to donate, we are always welcome any donations. We are charitable status, so we can give tax receipts. Yeah, that's it. We're basically sustained by volunteers and donations. So.
And you've got the space up there. You've been there for a while, because I
3 or 4 years. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I thought longer than that, because
No.
Oh, wow. But Spectrum's been established longer than 3 or 4 years.
About 7 years now.
7 years.
Yeah.
Where were you before?
On Herb Street in the old liquor store.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. That was actually the Green Party campaign office.
Oh, yes.
So it's amazing how things intermesh everywhere.
Yes,
I was
absolutely.
telling somebody last week, there's only 100 people who live in Kitchener. I know them all. I do everything. All right. Kate Glasson from Spectrum, thanks for dropping in.
Much.
It's great to have you here.
Thank you.
Thank you. A little bit more music. Coming up is Patrick Wade, Keep Dancing Forever.
I felt a strange vibration, and I had a lot of patience. Where is my other hand? Can somebody say? Can somebody tell? I love her, still I love her. Can't you hear me pray? Many, many ways. I love her, still I wonder. I wonder why. I wonder why.
Patrick Wade. And that was Where's My Other Half? Before that, we heard Keep Dancing Forever. Patrick wrote to me, said, I wanted to reach out and send out a digital copy of my new LP, Inglaterra, with hopes you might be interested in checking that out. Yes, Patrick, I am. It's wonderful music, and glad to have it here. Patrick writes, Dead Horse Beats has delivered a new full-length album entitled Inglaterra. The Montreal-based producer and multi-instrumentalist Patrick Wade has put together a new batch of songs via Bastard Jazz recordings that feature his signature spacey grooves and an increased focus on lyricism. And we heard that here today. We love CanCon music, and we play CanCon music, and sometimes we bring the CanCon artists into the studio. Welcome, Tim Lewis.
Welcome. Thank you, Vilab, for the invitation. It's wonderful to be here on the show.
Ran into Tim Lewis in the Spectrum office as I stuck my head in to invite Kate over.
It's a 2-for-1.
Yeah.
Monday special. You get to talk to Spectrum. You get to talk to Tim Lewis.
Yeah.
On the same morning.
What are you doing?
I am busy. I'm finishing up a new album. That's what I'm working on. It's been a little long. I've been chipping away at it. Usually I like to get in and work on an album start to finish, but circumstances have kind of forced my hand to chip away at it as opposed to working on it full force. But I just found out that I'll be playing the Waterloo Jazz Festival, which is one of the main festivals in the region this summer, and I thought sometimes the deadline is a good thing to have. Yes. So now by July 19th, the Friday evening, I'll be playing the Uptown Waterloo Jazz Festival. So the new album will be done by then.
Good.
You heard it here first.
Yes.
Matter of fact, I just said it out loud for the first time. It will be done.
I hope to be able to get a preview of that so that we can stick it on the airwaves and tell people to go listen to the stuff in real life.
fantastic that you mentioned this, because there is one song that is finished, mixed, mastered, and sent out for the Wilmot Terry Fox run. They put together a compilation CD called On the Road, and 100% of the, you can see it here on the, now we're actually broadcasting. Yeah. You can see it here on the radio. I'm holding it up. It's called On the Road, and it was it's 12, I think it's maybe 12 or more track CD, and all of the artists donated the songs to the CD, and the artwork was donated by Nigel Gorgic, and the mastering by John Bailey. And so 100% of the costs of this CD sales are going to 14 tracks. 14 tracks. Sorry, number 15, you didn't make it. 100% of the proceeds are going to Terry Fox Cancer Research, which is wonderful. So that got me to finish one of the songs, and I was honored to put one of the tunes from an upcoming CD on this Terry Fox run CD.
So this is going to be a world premiere?
Actually, you know what, Bob? You're right. You heard it here first on 102.7 CKMS. This is the radio broadcast premiere. It is a song that I wrote. I was on tour in Quebec, in Hudson, Quebec, and I was billeted in a wonderful home as I was playing a theater for a 2-week run. And the couple that put me up it was very well-to-do. They didn't need much, and so at the end of my stay, I wanted to buy them a gift as a thank you for putting me up, in their home for 2 weeks while I performed in this theater. And what do you get? Someone who's got everything. So I told them I would write a song for them, and actually, this is the song. It was their backyard overlooked a beautiful lake, and it was across from Oka in Quebec, and there, at the time of year, the lilacs were just on the tail end of the season. So there was this wonderful fragrance as you drove up their driveway, and these lilacs were just kind of finishing up their bloom. And so I wrote a song called "Last of the Lilacs" as a thank you to this wonderful couple that put me up for 2 weeks.
Lilacs are
and you're going to hear it first.
Let's listen to some Lilacs.
As if the sky burns for me, will I see you again? Who can say? Like each season, will you return to me? But unlike the springtime, will you stay? And the last of the lilacs are fading fast. Down by the lake, their falling shadows are cast. As the sun gently paints a picture on the water it sets upon. Last of the lilacs are soon gone. Southerly skies may become cloudy, westerly winds may often blow. The east brings a sunrise that is just out of reach. At night, northern lights may put on a show, and the last of the lilacs are fading fast. Down by the lake, their falling shadows are cast. As the sun gently paints a picture on the water it sets upon. The last of the lilacs are soon gone. as the sun gently paints a picture. Au revoir and adieu. The last of the lilacs in blue. Lilacs are gone, and so are you.
Lewis from an unreleased CD that's to come out later on mid-July.
And that's the world premiere.
World premiere. It's available on an album called On the Road.
On the Road. It's a fundraised CD for the Wilmot Terry Fox run. It's all proceeds, 100% proceeds go to Terry Fox Foundation Cancer Research.
Excellent. Where can you get the CD?
In my car right now. You know what?
I will put something in the show notes.
I please do, because yes.
Oh, your phone. I'm hearing odd noises through the headphones, but it turns out it's a phone ringing in the studio. That's fine.
Busy morning here, bustling.
It's a rich sound. It sounds wonderful. How do you do that? What's in the band? How do you get that sound?
Well, a lot of times we would go in and cut for the rest of this album. We're bringing in musicians and we're going to cut pretty much live off the floor. You get a good chunk of that. You can do some overdubs and add a person here and there. But for the most part, I've always recorded bringing people in, record the album. It's kind of old school. It's the way they've done it for years and years, especially in jazz. You get that kind of spontaneity. You get the way to feed off of people. But because of the nature of this album being chipping away at it, I've had to bring in different musicians at different times, which what ends up happening is you can't get that immediate feedback of the person next to you and what they're playing. But what you can get is a more of a layered texture. So this album, out of all the albums I've recorded, I've had 3 albums already previously. This will have more texture and more layering, just because of the nature of the recording. So it's just a different way of approaching it.
Yeah, and this is not exactly a commissioned work, but it is a work that you wrote.
A labor of love.
A labor of love.
Let's call it that way.
And it sounds nice, and it flows, it scans.
Well, I appreciate that.
That can't be easy to do.
No, but it's not my first album, and I kind of have sounds in my head. I know what I want to make. This next album is going to be a bit more, like I said, lush. Bring in some string arrangements and some local, some fantastic local ensembles to top up the band. And you wouldn't have everybody working at once. Again, in a full budgeted CD, you'd book a big studio and you'd have a symphony playing with the band and everything would be working. But in today's realistic budgets, you have to chip away and you have to bring in musicians in smaller studios. So, but you can still get that big sound. You just have to have the end game in mind.
But you need to have something to work with before you can get there.
So on your head.
Yeah.
And busy up there.
Does it come out lush and layered, or do you have to actually do some work to add to that? You've written something, you probably play it yourself on the piano.
Yes.
Say, this doesn't sound quite right. You have to go back and redo it.
Does
that happen a lot?
Yeah, and when I'm playing I'll play, let's say, solo piano and I'm performing a piece, in my head, it might sound a little bit bigger than, I'm hearing the parts that I want. As I'm playing just piano and vocals, I might hear, that's where the strings would come in. That's where I can hear a guitar fill. That's where I'd like to bring in a trumpet solo or something. So that level of creativity has to happen in your head first, and then you have to have the resources to bring it to light. So,
right. So there's a fair bit of arrangement involved.
Yes, and again, in this day with budgets, the pre-production and arrangements, you don't have the luxury of going in and trying something and seeing if it works and trying something else. You sort of have to make sure you know what it's going to sound like. So I've got a small studio in my basement at home, and I do some of the pre-production there to try out ideas first before I bring in some of the musicians.
So probably a full piano in there for the piano portion of it. And then do you do maybe a synthesizer arrangement for the stuff that you want to fill in with real trumpets and trombones?
Right now I'm working on, I'm going to bring a string quartet in for a couple of the tunes, and I'm writing out the string quartet parts, but then I'm going to play them with with synthesizer to hear what it sounds like,
Okay.
and then basically bring in the real players. You erase the synthesized sounds, and just working with the technology you have.
And so what happens to all that preparatory music? I mean, that's not music that's going to waste, is it?
I should hope not.
The recordings, you know.
I don't know. We'll find out.
You know, from the studio of Tim Lewis. Like a hidden CD underneath the
pre-production.
Yeah, exactly.
Those are the things that are playing in my car, because you listen to that as you're driving, and you get that's where you think, I like this, I don't like that. I've got endless burned CDs of various iterations of these tunes.
So it's not like an office job where you sit down and say, today I'm going to work on the string arrangement for this particular piece. It comes to you over time.
If you allow it, but if you force it, you have to. I got home last night from a show at 11 o'clock, and I went down to my studio and said, I am now working on a string quartet arrangement for a specific song. So you know, I heard someone say, I only write when the muse strikes. And the writer said, and the muse strikes every morning at 9 a.m. You know, you have to force yourself to be creative sometimes.
Is there such a thing as musician's block?
Yes, I think we invented it. The writer stole it from us. Creativity is something you can't kind of get on top of, but you can coax it, and certainly when it strikes you, you stay up a little later.
It's got to be different for a musician and a writer, because as a musician, you're not just writing the piece; you're also performing it. So you have a chance to work on the art outside of the writing phase. A writer writes a book, and the book is done. Possibly there's a few readings at libraries and bookshops,
yes.
But there's very little chance for performing a work for a writer.
Yes, I imagine so. With a writer, when the book is done, then they're moving on possibly to the next thing. But for a musician, now you need to bring that creation to life in a live setting, which.
Right.
Those are gigs. Those are good.
Yes, that should be the scarce resource that you can monetize.
Exactly.
Once the album is out and it gets on the internets, the YouTubes, the Googles, then I fear that you lose the monetization of that.
Yes, and with the ability to get your songs out to anyone, it comes the ability for people to be able to take any of this music and not quite appreciate the value of it. So it's a double-edged sword. You can get your music out across the world, but you might not get remunerated for it.
Yeah, so I find there's a big difference between cost and value. I think people appreciate the value of the music, but just aren't willing to pony up the cost for it.
Fair enough. That's true. I haven't used compliments to pay the rent yet. So.
that is true. Yeah, but you're appearing live.
I was just going to say, there's a few concerts I wouldn't mind mentioning.
Go ahead.
Because I just on a commercial break there, I went on June 9th. I'm volunteering or playing a performance for the KW Symphony Volunteer Association. We're doing an outdoor picnic for that on June 9th in Cambridge at a field in a pottery place. So, and I'll be at the Waterloo Jazz Festival on July 19th. I'm playing Rockaway Gardens on July 21st. On a Sunday evening, there's a beautiful gazebo there. We set up a band in the round. These are all free concerts, and you can bring your own chairs and come out to that concert. Uptown Waterloo has a Thursday evening series. I'll be part of that. And you can just walk up and around Uptown Waterloo on Thursday evenings throughout the summer. They have a few appearances on that. There is a Terry Fox benefit concert coming up in New Hamburg on July 27th, and also Castle Kilbride in Baden has a series on Thursday evenings. That's a free concert series. Bring your own lawn chair, and I'll be there in August. So
excellent.
That's all those, except for the KW Symphony one, which is a ticketed event. All the rest of those concerts are all free concerts.
They're free to me to come and listen to the music.
Yes.
Hopefully you get some sort of remuneration out of that.
I hope so. We'll see. Okay. I'll have a new CD by then.
Yeah. So okay.
That's the thing. It'll be our chance to
be able to sell a few copies of the CD. Are any of these concerts the pass the hat type of concert?
I don't know. I'm always on stage. The hat never makes it.
Oh,
I don't know. That'd be nice. I'm not sure.
One of the concerts that I've been involved with was my father-in-law's concert in Elmira, the bluegrass and country music concerts, where there was always a pass the hat.
Yes.
And so people would pay into the buckets, and typically about $1 a head. So it get a few hundred people out in the audience, and that's probably not a bad night for a small band.
I will bring a bucket.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on to something else. We've got a gentleman named Thompson Egbo. You know this gentleman?
Yes, I've not met him, but I know some of the guys in his band and have worked with him.
Some wonderful piano jazz. Let's listen to something from his album called The Offering. This is a piece called The Tribute. Thompson Egbo. He writes, it's celebrated Toronto artist Thompson Egbo shares his new single, It's Not That Serious, which is released back in March. It's appearing on his upcoming album, The Offering, which we have in our digital music library. We heard a couple of tracks from that. Thompson says, it's not that serious is this year's mantra. It's not about getting caught up with yourselves and the things that don't matter over a year from today, but how we get out of our own way and move forward because it's not that serious. You ever have thematic albums there, Tim?
Pardon?
You have Tim Lewis in the studio. Tim Lewis, our own local jazz pianist. Do you ever have a thematic album where the album is all interrelated pieces and songs and compositions?
They are getting more interrelated. It used to be just write a song, and then when you have enough songs, make an album. I find as my writing matures, I'll pick certain themes or style or a certain level of energy, and then bring a more cohesive album than it used to.
You've had a thematic Christmas album.
I did that was thematic,
Yes.
and that actually was because it was like more holiday than Christmas. There were very few cover tunes on there, and I wrote sort of from the, let's say, end of Thanksgiving to New Year's Eve. I kind of went, that actually was thematic. Now that you mentioned it, you're right. I do. Yes, Bob. Let me take two. I do write thematic albums. I forgot about that. And this upcoming CD will be called Bittersweet. There's been some high points and low points in the last few years, and so it's a bit more reflective. This next album.
I see somewhat of a theme across your albums, because the first one was Untrue.
Yes. Well, yes. They're not all happy moments, though.
I guess the traumatic moments make for better creativity.
They
in music.
do. They do. They make for a little bit. If someone has a traumatic life experience and they can learn from it, share it, write about it, maybe from the catharsis of it, or just the idea of getting out there and people relating. That's as an artist, that's part of what you can do.
Yeah. So let's move into a little bit different genre. This is Doom Squad, an industrial techno electronic piece. I'll have something more to say about Doom Squad in just a few moments. This is General Hum.
I'm now wondering what LA will look like without predators.
I'm not conservative, but I find myself clinging on to the past for dear life.
I'm not conservative, but I long for the days when a coffee starving Instagram thread, and I wonder why. I'm following you when I should be following you. Somehow I've lost my way. What's this force that's moving?
Oh, I'm trying to make myself mindful. Trying to stay humanized. While my practice is eroding since 2016. I thought my fortress could withstand the time. Is there a place for spirit anymore? I thought my fortress could withstand the time. Is there a place for spirit anymore?
eyes lost no faith. What's this force that's moving me?
Doom Squad. Not quite what I was expecting. Certainly a little bit of electronica there. From the doomsquad.bandcamp.com page. Even this far into the 21st century, the recent social media furor surrounding the U.S. Congresswoman and freestyle dancer Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez illustrated that the spectacle of someone dancing without compunction can still ruffle the right and alt-right feathers. In which case, all hail the third album from Toronto's ardent art dance sibling trio, Doom Squad. Been released on Bella Union label on May the 10th. Let Yourself Be Seen is the most assertive, ambitious, groove-sodden declaration of intent yet from Trevor, Jacqueline, and Ali Blumas. The sound of dance floor believers and thinkers firing on all personal and political fronts. A time when we need it most. We still have in the studio Tim Lewis, our local favorite jazz musician, and Kate Glasson from Spectrum. And I learned through conversations while we were playing music that you are a musician.
Was a
Never
musician.
stopped being a musician.
I haven't played in years. Well, that's not true. I do play around at home, but I haven't played anywhere in years.
And then what do you play?
Bass.
Bass.
Yeah.
Electric
I've been playing
bass.
since, electric, upright, you name it. I've got them both. So I've been playing since, 1981. My friends and I set up a ska band, and
Ska band.
Yep.
And then you said you were playing blues as well.
I was playing blues in my late 20s. Yeah.
And this is all before digital technology existed to
Exactly.
To make distribution cheap and easy.
Exactly. So we have no albums or anything. No.
Sadly, we miss out on your talent.
All live.
Yeah, that's good. Live music is the most important kind of music.
Fun.
Yeah, it is. So Tim, any final concerts, things that you want to give a final plug to?
Final concerts. I know. I spent this weekend in Wellesley. I was a volunteer for a volunteer judge for Wellesley Idol, which is a fun talent contest for the local community. What's great about it is the first round was over the weekend at the Wellesley Community Center, and the children that are singing, if they make it to the next round, now we have mentors where the judges are not only volunteers and judges, but we do mentoring sessions with these young musicians. And it is amazing to work with them throughout the summer. And then at the Wellesley ABC Festival and the Fall Fair for the next two rounds. And the growth from the children, it's just absolutely amazing. So the first round was yesterday and everyone was fantastic. The only hard part about this is that because it's a contest, you do have to kind of whittle it down. But from this point on, everyone is all these students are being mentored and worked with. It's a wonderful experience, and the talent of this next generation, you'll be happy to know is we're in good hands.
Yeah, so much talent all over Waterloo region.
Absolutely, it's amazing.
One of those talents is Glenn Love. We'll go back to him. We started the hour with Glenn Love. This is from his Cheetah EP, the title track called Cheetah. Thank you very much, Tim. Thank you very much, Kate. It's been wonderful to have you in the show. You're in the same building, pop down anytime at 10 o'clock on a Monday afternoon or Monday morning. Glenn Love, Cheetah.
CKMS.
Oh, love it. Do it.
CKMS. CKMS.
Radio live at 102.7. I keep a close watch on this heart of mine. I keep my eyes wide open all the time. I keep the ends out for the tie that binds. Because you're mine, I'll walk the line. Because you're mine, I'll walk the line. I find it very, very easy to be true. I find myself alone when each day is through. Yes, I'll admit that I'm a fool for you. Because you're mine, I walk the line. As sure as night is dark, day is light. I keep you on my mind both day and night. In happiness I've no proofs that it's right. Because you're mine, I walk the line. As sure as night is dark, day is light. I keep you on my mind both day and night. Happiness I've no proof that is right. Because you're mine, I walk the line. Because you're mine, I walk the line.
Tim Lewis playing the Johnny Cash classic, I Walk the Line, at a slightly slower pace than Johnny Cash walked it. We have in the studio with us today Jim Stewart and Rihanna DeWitt from the Waterloo Region Health Coalition. Welcome.
Thanks, Bob. Very happy to be here, Bob. Thank you.
I asked you to come down because there has been a lot of things happening lately with healthcare in provincial politics.
Absolutely. Everyone understands that healthcare is a provincial mandate. And with the new provincial government under Mr. Ford, what we've got is some massive changes to our healthcare. In fact, in our opinion, this is an actual betrayal of everything that we stand for in Ontario with respect to public healthcare.
We didn't hear anything from the platform from the PCs during the election. So this was all kind of unexpected, wasn't it?
Yes, totally unexpected. In fact, what we've come to understand over the last few months is that this new legislation called Bill 74, the People's Healthcare Act, which in our opinion should be called the privatization of the People's Healthcare Act, was written in secret. We wouldn't have had any information about this particular bill unless it had been leaked to the NDP and subsequently to us at the Ontario Health Coalition. And consequently, what we've come to understand that this is a well-developed strategy, legislation designed really to transfer all of our public assets to the hands of unnamed entities. These entities, in our mind, are really private for-profit corporations that are really focused on privatizing and delivering healthcare in a US-style model.
Can I just add to that although we're here mostly to speak about healthcare, but what is clear to all of us by this time is that this is a concerted effort on a lot of different services that we as regular people depend on and that we take for granted. I mean, we're Canadians and we think that we have a public healthcare system. We're Canadians and we think we've got a good education system and it's free and we've got a relatively inexpensive compared to many other countries, post-secondary education system. But we see all of these things coming under attack. And the clever part of the attack is it's not a large scale, let's slash $5 billion from the budget type of attack. It is insidious, small little cuts in places where it really matters. And if we look at the budget and the discussions around the budget of this conservative government, what they are doing is they are cutting, I think, almost $3.5 billion from the budget. But when we look at individual budgets, we don't see the cuts that huge. They are a lot of cuts, but what is happening is that of the cuts, about $500 million is being spent on paying the deficit, which arguably is the argument for having these cuts. But so if you're having billions of dollars cut here and there and there and there out of the budget, and only 500 million is going towards paying for the deficit, you then have to ask yourself, where's the rest of the money going to? Well, the rest of the money is gone because those are cuts made to taxes, and they're not made to the taxes of you and I and regular working and middle class people. They are taxes cut for the rich and for the benefit of the super wealthy. So right now, ordinary people are paying in services for a wealth transfer to the people who are already at the 1% top of the pile.
And just to add to that, when we look at, and we'll talk a little bit in detail about what this dismantling of our public healthcare system actually looks like, and we'd be happy to talk about the chaos that's going to occur as this continues to expand throughout public healthcare. But just to add to Riani's point about this issue about the deficit. So there's all this talk about financial accountability on part of the government. But the reality is that we don't have as much of a deficit issue as we have a revenue issue. So we have to really consider the revenue component here. If we are slashing taxes for all the corporations, if we're providing all kinds of handouts to corporations like General Motors in Oshawa, and see what happened there, or if we are slashing, all kinds of, creating all kinds of loopholes in the ability of the very extremely rich to park their money in a tax-free zone like the Cayman Islands, we do have a revenue problem. And without addressing both the revenue side and the deficit side, it's really difficult to change the financial status of Ontario. As Riani said, it can't be done just on the backs of the middle class.
So the taxes are being cut, making less money available for the services.
Yes.
So the services are no longer adequate, which then leads to the conclusion that they must be privatized.
Yes, because the argument will be that the services are in crisis. Look, we have this public health care, but it's not working because we've got backlogs and it's a crisis. And the only way to solve it is to sell it off to the private sector.
But it's a crisis of our own making.
Precisely. So you create the crisis and I hate to, this is not a conspiracy theory, but there's a link. We need to look at things in a broader context and in a global context. And this seems to be the playbook of right-wing groups, organizations, and political parties across the world, is create a crisis, and then you come in and you quasi-solve it by privatizing it. And we're constantly being told that the private service, the private sector is so much more efficient. It's cost efficient. They can deliver a better service at a better price. How?
Yeah.
They run for a profit.
Yes.
So the only way they can make a profit is to either charge an arm and a leg for everything, or they can make a profit by charging what it would have cost in the public sector, but giving us a much more poorly resourced and inadequate service. So you're either going to compromise on the service delivery, or you're going to pay 3, 4, 5, 10 times what you would have paid in the public sector. That is the only way the private sector becomes an alternative for the public sector.
The money that goes to profit would have been better spent on healthcare in the first place.
Yes, and we see that, sorry, Jim, we see that in our long-term care facilities, where when we look at how the money is spent in private sector, the for-profit care facilities vis-a-vis the public sector facilities. In the public sector facilities, the bulk of the money goes towards frontline staff. In the private sector facilities, the money spent on actual staff to deliver the service, to take care of the people who they need to take care of, is much lower. And that is why we have a situation where we have, 6 minutes in the morning for care facilities to take care of a person, from waking that person up to actually getting them to a breakfast table, which is ridiculous, because I promise you, I can't do that.
Yeah, washing, bathing, dressing, and possibly wheeling the person to from the bedroom to the dining hall.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it takes me 6 minutes just to hit my snooze button.
And I have a little bit of experience with some of these long care facilities. I have family resident in a long-term care facility. These people aren't paid well. These are minimum wage workers, and part-time workers at that. Because I know that some of these workers rush out from their shift to go to another facility to put in a second shift, because it's just not a livable wage that they're working at.
Bob, what we have right now is called a PSW crisis. So that's personal support workers. These are the people that are being paid minimum wage. So they're being paid about $16 an hour on average. And you're correct. They're all part-time workers. They're hoping, and they go into healthcare believing that they're going to have a career as a PSW. But what the reality is for them is constant overtime work that's forced upon them, no benefits, no future for full-time work, and really just living in a day-to-day existence, paycheck to paycheck. So that's one of the reasons why we have this PSW crisis, because PSWs are realizing that this is not the kind of job that is well suited for anybody's future. So they're quitting in droves. And right now, the standard length of service from a brand new PSW who just got released after 2 full semesters of education into the PSW environment is only 13 months before they're out.
Wow.
So that's an issue. But I would like to just to reframe what we're talking about a little bit and go back to Bill 74.
Mm-hmm.
So Bill 74, so your listeners can understand, is really designed to restructure and dismantle public health care. The legislation itself talks about the transfer of our 1,800 services. That's the entire breadth and width of our breadth and depth of our public health care system, it being transferred to these private entities. And they have euphemistically called these private entities healthcare teams. But the reality is that it's going to be for-profit corporations. So a more apt description here would be conglomerates. And these conglomerates will be set up across the province, and they'll be pulling the resources out of our public health care the way they see fit. So what we're going to end up with is a patchwork of private delivery models across Ontario. And the government of Ontario doesn't even know how many of these conglomerates there will be. They say anywhere from 30 to 50. Well, it's really important that we understand the numbers here. We have to understand what the details actually look like. We have to understand what the plan is for the restructuring, forced amalgamations, closure of all our services, and destruction of public health care. We really need to understand what that is going to look like.
We used to have the LINs, the local
health integration network.
Local health integration networks. And before that, we had the CCACs.
Right.
This is a conglomeration of multiple LINs into a larger jurisdiction.
So what they've done is they've taken all the existing agencies. There were 20 different agencies, including all the 14 LINs across the province. Mm-hmm. And they've taken and Cancer Care Ontario, the Trillium Health Network for... the transfer of donated organs, for instance. They've taken all of our 20 existing agencies and they've put them into one ginormous super agency, and that has massive problems for us. And what they're saying is that the super agency now will control and tell everybody how healthcare will be delivered. In other words, force the mergers and the development of these conglomerates, these 30 to 50 conglomerates across the province. The problem with the super agency, of course, is that all of the details about controlling public health care will be placed in one location in Toronto. There'll be no public accountability available to the citizens of Ontario towards the new super agency called Health Ontario. And there'll be no ability for us to review what they're doing. There is no requirement for the super agency to even tell us what they're doing. There's no appeal process. There's no organization that will help us to really uncover what's actually happening until it's already done, until the transfer has been concluded and our public services are now in the hands of private conglomerates.
And no public information on this plan available at all.
That's right. And furthermore, the super agency and the Minister of Health, under this legislation, have been provided with what's known in the legal jargon as unfettered powers. So that means they're not accountable to anybody. And with the stroke of a pen, they can privatize our healthcare, they can shut down hospitals, they can transfer hospital services out of the hospital into private clinics, they can expand the number of private clinics, and so forth. It's really a dreadful strategy if you are really a believer in public health care.
Yeah, it does sound like dismantling. Go ahead, Riani.
Thanks, Jim and Bob. One of the things we hear from Conservatives a lot is that this Bill 74, nowhere in the bill does it actually use the term privatization. And so the Conservative defense is, but the bill doesn't talk about privatization. Well, you know what else it doesn't talk about? It doesn't talk about defending public health. And when you create a super agency and you then appoint a board for that super agency that consists of investment bankers, people from private healthcare facilities, people who have been well-known vocal advocates for the privatization of healthcare, what else are you supposed to deduce from that other than that they are aiming at privatization?
So what we do know about the governance of these entities is that they have a bias towards privatization.
Absolutely. The other question that you have to ask yourself is, we have a provincial Department of Health. If we have a public health system and we value that public health system, why on earth do we need a super agency that operates outside of government? Why can the Department of Health not run those functions internally? That oversight, why is it not being done departmentally? Because if it's being done in the department, it requires parliamentary oversight and it requires oversight by the Auditor General. When you place it outside in the hands of agency, suddenly you eliminate a lot of the controls and the oversights that you would have had if it was being done in the government. So again, for me, that just spells an absolute disregard for the public aspect of our healthcare system.
So just to add to that too, this development of this super agency, this Health Ontario super agency that's outside the requirements of governmental process and the regulations that we have as a democracy, and being transferred to the super agent, what that really is nothing more than the ability of private corporations to take the wealth of Ontarians and develop different ways of providing additional levels of profit for their corporations using healthcare and the taxpayers' revenue to support our healthcare. And if you think about the transfer of all of the services, we're talking about the technologies like the software systems, the diagnostic imaging systems. We're talking about the level of expertise by all of the variety of different individuals who are actually operating this type of equipment. We're talking about the actual locations of where we actually can deliver healthcare, and transfer all of that to the private domain, to these private entities. The cost is absolutely enormous, but if it's done through the super agency, it's also hidden. And we're really concerned about that. So there's no auditing capability provided under this legislation to look at the cost of this transfer. And the cost of the transfer is something that we'd really like to focus on. If the government, the conservative government, is really focused on providing us with a improved financial regime, shouldn't it be upon them to deliver us with the financial plan and the costing and the auditing of what this type of transfer of all of our public services and public infrastructure and public technologies will cost?
You mentioned as one of the services, diagnostic services. That's been privatized for a while. There's many private clinics to do radiology, sonograms, all manner of things. How was that different from what's being proposed? Was there transparency when diagnostic imaging and the like was being privatized?
Yes, there was transparency because it was all governed under the legislation around the LHINs, the local health integration networks had legislation, so there was public accountability, and we had understanding of the public governance model around the LHINs, and consequently the payment for different diagnostic procedures delivered in our region. That's gone. As we mentioned earlier, the LHIN legislation has been dismantled.
And this is already in effect now?
It's already in effect. The LHIN, the governance of the LHINs have all been transferred to the super agency, again, quietly. So that's gone. The distinction between the diagnostic services is that a diagnostic services, let's use an MRI, for instance. An MRI can be delivered in the hospital today, as you know.
Yes.
And the cost to the government of Ontario through OHIP for that MRI delivered by the hospital is about $250. If an MRI is delivered today in a public clinic setting, in a private clinic setting, the MRI will bill, that private clinic will bill OHIP $800. And we know that as privatization expands, and we've seen this in the province of British Columbia, where we have got basically the epicenter of privatization in the entire country, we know that an MRI in a private clinic in British Columbia will cost that $800 plus an additional $250 as a user fee to the patient who is now attempting to get an MRI. So,
and is this increase in price entirely due to the profits being siphoned off and being billed to the province?
yes, I mean, we're looking at a for-profit model here. So this additional cost associated with the cost to the province and the cost to people receiving an MRI in a private model is absolutely all profit-driven.
So from $250 to $800, that's what, $550 difference. That's a lot of profit.
It's a lot of profit.
So there's going to be a lot of pressure by those people making that profit to have this pass.
And it is already passed. Bill 74 is the law.
Yes.
So it's already passed, and it's this level of transfer of our public wealth into the hands of private for-profit operators that is most concerning, especially when you consider things like the fact that our demographics, the age of our population is steadily increasing, and the population itself is steadily growing. So we've got more people, and they're much older. The complexity of care, it's called the acuity of care, is much higher, and our public system is being underfunded tremendously. So there's that impetus to force people out of the public system because of the underfunding into the private delivery models, despite the cost. But it's really wonderful if you happen to be owner of a private clinic.
Yeah.
I also want to say that, you know, as much as we're complaining about what the Conservative government today is doing, some of these problems come from a while back. They're not all fresh in the making. The underfunding of our healthcare system, I think, probably started when? Around the Harris days?
About 15 years.
Yeah. So due to the Harris austerity, and we might want to add that despite all the austerity, despite all the cuts, I think Ontario ended up with a debt, 50% higher than what it was when Harris took the government. So the austerity does not always help, but he started cutting the allocation to healthcare, and it's never caught up. And so Canada is at the low end of the OECD countries in terms of per capita funding of people's healthcare. And Ontario is at the bottom of the provinces in Canada. So Ontarians who think we pay a lot for healthcare from our taxes, we actually the province that pays the least for our healthcare. I also hear a lot of people say, well, maybe private healthcare is not such a bad idea. And I don't know if they think that people south of the border exaggerate their woes, but a lot of people think that we pay a lot more taxes in Canada than people do in the States. Well, in reality, we don't. We pay a little bit more, but we're not paying hundreds or thousands of dollars more per year than people in the US. But people in the US have to buy private insurance. And that private insurance for a basic covers almost nothing program can cost around $400 per person per month. A reasonable healthcare policy in the US will cost you between $600 and $1,000 per person per month. And then once you've got your healthcare, you have deductibles, meaning you first have to pay $2,000 or $3,000 or $5,000 out of pocket before your healthcare kicks in.
And this healthcare insurance, this $600 to $1,000, is compulsory insurance, is it not?
Well, whether it's compulsory or not, if you don't have it, let's say it's free. You can decide whether you want it or not. What happens if you don't have it? The idea that, well, as long as I live healthy and eat healthy and exercise, I won't need healthcare, it's rubbish.
Yeah.
Children end up in hospital with heart defects. Some things are genetical, some things are hereditary. Accidents happen,
yes.
Things happen, life happens. You cannot predict your health, no matter how healthy you think you are. There are perfectly healthy young people who eat healthy, who exercise regularly, and in their 20s or 30s, they develop a heart disease or they have an aneurysm. These things happen. But then you have co-pays. You've got limits to how much you can spend on everything. You have to shop within your network. You can only go to the doctors they tell you to go to. You can't apply to go to another doctor. You have exclusions. Your healthcare policy may or may not cover the thing that is wrong with you. And then very often, in most cases, pre-existing conditions are excluded. So there is absolutely no way that private health is a better option than public health. And we should never forget that one of the reasons we have a public health system and why it is so important is because health is one of the largest determinants of our economic well-being.
Yes.
When people don't have wealth, they don't have access to healthcare. And when people don't have access to healthcare, it can adversely affect the way in which they can participate in economic activity. Those things are interlinked. And when we privatize healthcare, what we are saying is that anybody who dares to get sick runs the risk of falling down the economic ladder. And everybody who's already at the bottom of the economic ladder will be bereft of these benefits.
It's a bit of a cycle there. You know,
Yes.
The people who are poor have poor health. I mean, that's poverty is the indication of health.
Precisely.
And then the other way around, if you don't have good health, you can't hold down a job and you get even poorer.
Yes.
So it's
and you might even be a reasonably middle-class person. You might have some savings. You might even have healthcare. And suddenly something happens to you that needs healthcare intervention that is either not covered by your medical insurance or it's not covered to the full extent. And suddenly you have to start paying out of pocket for the treatment. And before you blink, your savings are depleted. You are not able to work because you're undergoing treatment or you're too sick to work. And suddenly what you thought was the life you had built through hard work, through doing all the right things, through ticking all the boxes, that carpet gets ripped from under you and you become nothing in terms of the provision of that service that you so desperately need.
So let's just use a real life analogy for what Rianni was just speaking about. So we're now talking under Bill 74 about transferring all of our public wealth to private hands. Another example of what that really looks like is the transfer of our highway, 407, the 407 ETR. As you recall, the province of Ontario, through taxation, paid for that new ETR highway. And then it was sold off to private interests. And now the 407 is the most expensive highway in the world. And many people can't afford to use the highway that they actually paid for. So we are really concerned about what's going to happen with all of this restructuring of our existing public health care. And what we believe will occur is what we've seen occur in other jurisdictions. And the word for it is chaos. We're talking about years and years of chaos as we move hospitals from one part of the town to another part of the town, and we move services out, as we rebrand the hospitals, as we move technology around, as we move it into private clinics and shut down services across the province and develop these conglomerates that are going to look different no matter where you go. It's going to be incredibly chaotic. People won't know what their healthcare system is really designed to do. And if anybody has ever lived through just a corporate merger, they understand that these types of mergers between just two corporations, they take years to unfold and to sort of become the kind of entity that was envisioned. So when we're destroying 20 agencies across the province and 1,800 services and amalgamating them through mega forced mergers and restructuring, it will be chaotic. I'm sorry, chaotic. So, and we've already lived through this in the Harris years. The Michael Harris, the premier of the province of Ontario, decided he was going to restructure all of the hospitals in Ontario, and many people remember this. The rationale for the restructuring was that they would save $800 million. In effect, and what happened after that level of chaos was a spend totaling $3.9 billion. That's with a capital B, $3.9 billion to save $800 million. Wow. That's what the Auditor General of the province of Ontario told us that restructuring costs.
And even after that hospital restructuring took place, hospitals still had a degree of autonomy in how they ran the hospital. Hospital administrators managed the hospitals. Will that still be the case?
No, that will not be the case because right now, well, actually, up until Bill 74 was enacted, the board of directors of the hospital had a very powerful say in what happened at the hospital level. Now that they are completely superseded by the super agency. The super agency in Toronto can make any decision on any hospital anywhere in the province. So we're concerned about the chaos. We're very much concerned about the fact that there's been no costing model developed at all for this. The Ford administration said that they have costed this and budgeted it fully, but no one has ever seen any of the details. And again, the details do matter. And fundamentally, there's been no plan. There was no white paper announced and delivered prior to the legislation, so we had no opportunity to review what the government was actually planning because there is no plan. And just recently, the province of Ontario cut $53 million from the Health Systems Research Fund. The Health Systems Research Group is the group that actually looks at our policies in healthcare and tries to understand how it will work with our population in Ontario to provide appropriate services across the province to all of the Ontarians that benefit from our public health care system. So that's being funded as well. So we've got no plan, no possibility for a future plan, and no costing. You have to ask yourself, then what would an MPP, a Conservative MPP, say to us when we wanted to speak to them about this? And what's really interesting is that for months now, ever since we were first advised of Bill 74, we've been trying to reach out to all of the Conservative MPPs across the province, and particularly here in Waterloo Region, and have been unable to secure any opportunity to speak with them, either through phone calls, emails, or actually knocking on their doors and asking their staff for a meeting to sort of review our deep concerns about what their policy actually looks like.
We've got three Conservative MPPs and two NDP MPPs in Waterloo Region. You've been to Catherine Fife and Laura May Lindo, the Waterloo and Kitchener Centre MPPs, both NDPs.
Yes, we have.
And you've met with those, and they
Yes,
were
we
pretty
have.
quick on the ball to accept your appointment.
Very responsive and deeply concerned as well about what's happening to public health care.
On the other hand, Belinda Karahalios, Amy Fee, and Mike Harris Jr. have not responded to your requests at all.
In fact, one of them did respond. Amy Fee did take a meeting with us, but we presented quite a lot of information to her, and she sat there in stony silence and failed to respond to almost any of our points. And it was just shocking. It was as if we were speaking to a brick wall. So no responsiveness, no ability to sort of support any of the policy that the Ford administration has brought forward. In fact, it's our opinion that the Ford administration is telling the PC MPPs not to respond to any questions about what's actually occurring. They would like to keep it under wraps, in secret, and to keep people in the dark.
From their perspective, that's probably the safest approach. So what have you been doing to get some traction here?
Okay, so what we've been doing is we've been going directly to both the people and to the other government levels that we can speak to. So we've spoken to different city councils. Rihanna and I made a full presentation to the councillors at the region of Waterloo because we felt that the regional government should understand what was happening, specifically to the cuts in public health. So, and I'll let Rihanna speak to public health in a moment, but we've spoken to them. We have went directly to the people. We've held town halls. And in fact, we're going to hold another town hall on Bill 94 on June 19th. And that you can find that information on our website at Waterloo Region Health Coalition, or simply send us an email at Waterloo Region Health Coalition @gmail.com, or see us on our Facebook site at Waterloo Region Health Coalition. So the point is that we went to the public and we're trying to inform the public directly on what's actually happening with Bill 74 and the implications of Bill 74, because if we just rely upon the media, the traditional media, or maybe the Ontario News, the propaganda station from the progressive conservatives, we are not going to see the realities of the chaos, the cost, and the lack of planning.
The public's been popping up to help you, though.
The public has been popping up to help us. We have been grateful at our town hall. We had almost 180 people at our town hall in Kitchener on public health care, and we hope to have the same number of people at the next town hall on June the 19th at 6:30. Please come out and help us get the word out.
And you mentioned our pop-up rallies.
Oh, no, I'll let you do
That's what I was alluding to, yes, yes.
I mean, Bob's handing you the baton and you're not running with it. So we have these pop-up rallies
Yes.
every
What's
Friday.
a pop-up rally?
It's a pop-up rally or a pop-up protest, whatever rocks your boat. So every Friday from 3:30 till 4:30, we do these pop-up rallies in front of the various Conservative MPPs' offices, and we rotate them. And we're not the only group. So I know the education people do theirs, and we plan it so that ours do not coincide with theirs at the same place, so that
excellent.
we can keep the pressure on, so that every Friday, hopefully we can get a third group to start in the rotation, so that there can be people in front of every MPP's office every Friday. And I must tell you, the first time we did it, we had the few odd people driving past and giving us a honk.
Yes.
And it's as if every single Friday we get more and more people honking. And our pop-up protests vary. We've had as little as 3 people doing it. We've had as many as 12 people doing it. It's absolutely a come as you can. We post it on our Facebook page. We say where it's going to be, what time it's going to be. And if you can come, you can come. If you can't, fine. If you can just drive by and honk at us, that's great too. We've had people stop and buy us Timbits. Brooke, if you're listening, thank you very much. And yeah, the support is great. We bring posters. If people have their own posters they want to bring with, do that. If you don't have a poster, we'll give you one. But we've also had people stop and come to us and talk to us and say, thank you for doing this. And they supported and they worried. And people are just, they're feeling it. And I think one of the really frustrating things, and it should have come out of what Jim said as well, we have these things pushed on us in healthcare, in education, in environment, in so many aspects. But it seems as if there isn't a plan on the table. And I'm saying it like that specifically. It seems as if there isn't a plan on the table for anything. Everything this government does, it's sort of like, well, we'll see how it falls. But what we have learned through our experience is that Doug Ford and the Conservatives ran a campaign based on no platform and no plans. And yet miraculously, 3 seconds after they were sworn in, they suddenly had piles of documents to throw on the table, which means they lied. When they went around as if they're clueless and didn't know what they were going to do except cut taxes and give us a buck a beer, they were lying to people. They knew exactly what they had on the cards. They had been working on these schemes behind closed doors for months prior to the election, and they had it ready to go from the word go. So when I say they don't have a plan on the table, it does not mean that I'm convinced they don't have a plan. But the fact that it's not on the table makes me worry about what kind of plan is it that they cannot share it with the public.
Yeah, so as Rianni said, basically what we're talking about is a government that's focused on their ideology, not on their policies or on good governance. We have a progressive conservative government that's fixated on reducing costs, not on increasing revenue or having some sort of balance between cost and revenue. So this ideology is driving them to make a series of different cuts. They're spending more money right now than the Wynne government has spent on a variety of mistaken moves that they are trying again to keep hidden. But the point is that this is all ideology driven, and the people that are now controlling the Ford administration's agenda are all people who are driven by their privatization ideology. And this is not what the people of the province of Ontario want. In fact, the most recent polls, our Ipsos Reid poll that came out just last week, talked about 80% of the people of Ontario no longer support the Ford policies, specifically around public health care and the reduction and costs of our public health system. And the public health system is enormously important if you want to look at public health, because every dollar that you put into public health, these are the people who are protecting us from different types of endemics, infectious diseases, testing our water supplies, making sure that the food we eat is safe. So when you spend $1 on public health, it's as if you're saving $9 on public health care. Cutting $200 million from public health doesn't make any sense at all.
Doesn't sound like sound, responsible financial action at all. You're the Waterloo Region Health Coalition, but you're just not alone in this. Waterloo Region Health Coalition meets regularly, second Monday of the month?
We meet the second Monday of every month at the St. Andrew's Church in downtown Kitchener, right across from the Kitchener Public Library. We have free parking there, and the public is welcome to come and join us. In fact, we encourage it. So
you should have some coffee as well.
Yeah, we typically provide coffee. So we speak about a variety of different issues, and we try to mobilize the Waterloo Region Health Coalition to reach out to other groups and other individuals across the region to help us support, protect, and maintain public health care. Because one of the last points I'd like to make here is that although we're talking about the Ford administration, public health care is not a partisan issue. It doesn't matter what your political stripe is. If you're a conservative, a liberal, a Green Party member, or an NDP, you support public health care, typically in Ontario, as do Canadians countrywide.
The core values that Canadians are so proud of, their public universal health care.
And that's precisely what's, Bob, that's precisely what's being dismantled right now under Bill 74. And this is why we've been harping away at Bill 74, why we have our pop-up rallies, why we've been holding our town halls. We need the people of Ontario to rise up with us and say, no, we do not support the transfer of our public health care, all of our assets, all of our public wealth, and our public health care system to the hands of private corporations.
Waterloo Region Coalition of Health is part of a large organization, the Ontario Coalition of Health?
Yes.
Ontario Health Coalition.
So Waterloo Region Health Coalition is a chapter of the Ontario Health Coalition based in Toronto, and we have chapters all across the province. And the Ontario Health Coalition is part of the Canadian Health Coalition. And it's really interesting that we have had to develop this kind of level of organization to protect something that we all cherish. As you mentioned, our core values, many of them are focused on maintaining our public health care system. And so it really begs the question as to why do we need the Canadian Health Coalition, the Ontario Health Coalition, and the Waterloo Regional Health Coalition to protect healthcare? And the reason why is because it's under attack.
Is there a role for the federal government to play here?
No, there isn't, unfortunately. Riani and I both met with MP Raj Sani to speak about the fact that we're very concerned, and we were quite desperate. That's why we went to the federal MP, not a provincial MPP, because we felt that he had to understand, and the federal government has to understand what's happening in Ontario to healthcare, and that if there was any possibility to strengthen the Canada Health Act, that should be done so that we can actually ensure that the transfer of our public wealth doesn't go into private hands. So we asked for an amendment to the Canada Health Act. So that's that's a big legislative challenge for any federal government. So we're not entirely sure how that's proceeding, but we'll continue to push it. And the reason why we felt that we had to go that way is because although we understand that the Canada Health Act really covers the administration of public health care, it doesn't have anything to do with the delivery of public health care in any given province. So having the Ministry of Health exist as an administrative body allows the Ford administration to circumvent the Canada Health Act and all the principles of public health care. And the development of the super agency allows them to privatize the delivery of healthcare, and that's the distinction. Riani, anything to add?
Not on that, but I just want to quickly circle back to the issue of the public health units. I love reading and learning about history, and not just about the big historical events, but to also get some kind of an understanding of what was life like for people in a certain era. And so I'm very cognizant of the fact that there are so many things that we take for granted today that did not exist 50 or 80 or 100 years ago. Today, it is inconceivable, I hope, for most people, that you would go to a washroom and leave without washing your hands. That has not always been a norm. That is something that we now do because there has been concerted educational efforts by public health units across the world to teach people about the health risks to not washing your hands after you've used a public facility. So we think these things have always been there. They haven't. There's a calculation that the average lifespan of a Canadian since the 1900s to today has increased by 25 years. That calculation also says that at least 20 of that 25 years is the result of public health care education, teaching us better ways to eat, teaching us about the virtue of exercise, teaching us to wash our hands when we've used a washroom, teaching us to brush our teeth regularly. So these are things that we laugh at. We think they are obvious, but they came as a result of money going into public healthcare education.
And all those things we take for granted are now in danger
Yes.
of no longer being promoted
Exactly.
by the
As is our public health system, which we've taken for granted. And let me even go as far out on the line as to say even our democracy. Because the way in which this conservative government is running government has got very little democracy in it. Democracy is not just going to a voting booth once in 5 years. Democracy is the ability of constituents to participate and to have a voice in the day-to-day running of their government. It is the ability of a constituent to phone an MPP and get an appointment. That is democracy. And when MPPs are not available, when there's an education concern meeting on a Sunday afternoon, and you have an MPP driving from Guelph to come and talk to constituents in Kitchener-Waterloo, but the Kitchener-Waterloo MPPs, specifically the Conservative Party MPPs, cannot be bothered to go to that meeting, that is not democracy. The other thing that we take for granted, and now I'm putting on my hat as a woman, the pro-choice movement. People can laugh, people can say we are fear-mongering when we say that our pro-choice privileges are under attack. This new super agency literally has the capacity to amalgamate all the abortion services of Ontario into one facility in Toronto with a waiting list of 6 months. And then where is your reproductive health choices?
So everything is in danger.
Yes. And I'm not saying that is what is going to happen, but what I really want to caution people is you need to open your eyes. You need to be aware of what's happening, because things that we take for granted today might not be there for us tomorrow. Nothing is for granted. Everything that we have fought for, we need to defend and we need to protect it.
So the health coalitions at the three levels of jurisdiction, Canada Health Coalition, the Ontario Health Coalition, and the Waterloo Region Health Coalition, you're not just doing this in isolation. There are other groups or other organizations locally that are also assisting you with this fight.
Yes, in fact, there are a number of other organizations that are assisting us. So we have a variety of different environmental groups like the Grand River Environmental Network, Divest Waterloo. You know, the environmental network has been very supportive of us. We have a variety of different political groups that have been helping us. The Green Party in particular, the NDP, and obviously the Liberals. In fact, the Liberal Healthcare Town Hall will happen on June 19th again. So we'd like to get people out to that. We'll have Natalie Maher, our Executive Director, at that event to speak about Bill 74 and the implications of it. But there is a variety of other groups. We have labor groups, Unifor, the Waterloo Region Labor Council has been incredibly involved in helping to mobilize what's happening. And on June the 7th, I'm glad you reminded me, there's a day of action. So we're going to be hosting or involved. In fact, we're going to be involved in a very large demonstration. It will start at Waterloo Town Square, and it will all of us will be marching down the Kitchener City Hall to protest all of the different cuts to all of the different services that Rhiannon just touched on: public education, public health care, public health units, autism clinics, reductions in mental health funding, etc. It's almost nonstop. Environmental challenges like Bill 66 that was really designed to eliminate many of our environmental protections across the province. So yes, there's an enormous groundswell of people who are very much angered by these policies, this ideologically driven perspective without any plan at all.
We've really only talked today about Bill 74. You mentioned Bill 94. I'm not sure if that is that a...
If I'd said Bill 94, I misspoke.
Okay,
I was
it is
referring to
Bill 74.
74. Yeah.
So we've really just concentrated on Bill 74.
Right.
But there's a whole pile of other legislation that you've just mentioned, the environmental stuff, which is Bill 66, amongst other things, municipal legislation. You probably need to come back.
Yeah, we would love to come back to speak to that. Now, I would just like to end up with one point. It's a little outside the realm, but we have, and part of our health coalition, a woman who is very much supportive. her name is Sharon, very much supportive of proportional representation. And we invited Sharon to come to our Waterloo Region Health Coalition and give us a lecture on what proportional representation could mean for healthcare. And one of the salient points that really struck me was the fact that she described this financial implications of proportional representation. In fact, all the countries, or most of the countries that run proportional representation in Scandinavia, Germany, etc., they're running surpluses, not deficits. So they have fiscal responsibility as a result of their political organization in their country. And I found it absolutely stunning that we keep talking about our deficits year in, year out. And there's an obvious resolution to that, and that would be potentially voting for 2 representatives instead of 1 in every given region.
That's one way. The other thing is that we are seeing all this legislation being enacted by a government, the provincial government, that has a majority of the seats in the legislature, but with only about 40% of the votes. So 60% of the population is pretty much against all the stuff that's happening here.
Precisely. Well, I'd like to suggest that that's much more than 60%, because as we've mentioned earlier, there was no announcements during the election of what these cuts would look like. There was no indication of Bill 74. No one voted for the dismantling of our public health care system, and people are not supportive of the underfunding and defunding public education either. So if that's not talked about in the election, it's very difficult to vote for or against it.
So for proportional representation, go to fairvotewrc.ca. For the Waterloo Coalition of Waterloo Region Coalition of Health, Waterloo Region Health Coalition.
Go to Waterloo Region Health Coalition on Facebook. Waterloo Region Health Coalition.
And I just want to give a quick shout out to Council of Canadians, which is another group. The people that you've mentioned, Sharon Somerville, who's a member of Fair Vote Waterloo, you, Jim Stewart, and you, Rihanna Duet. You're some of the 100 people that I know that do everything here in Waterloo Region. So I appreciate that. I thank you very much for coming in and just scraping the surface of the issue here.
Well, we'd be happy to come back. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bob. And can I just shout out to everybody out there who is worried about these things but don't know what to do or how to react, and who maybe have never been to a protest. I've heard someone recently say that some people are scared to come to a protest. Please don't. It is incredibly positive energy. You will gain from it as much as you will help the cause. So when there's a protest near you for any of these causes that are near or dear, please go. Thanks for having us.
So quick, next protest is when? Will that be a pop-up on Friday?
We have a pop-up on Friday at Belinda Carlhouse's office in Cambridge, and that will be at 3:30 to 4:30. Okay. And again, we'll have the Healthcare Town Hall on June 19th at 6:30.
Excellent. Jim Stewart, Rihanna Duet, thank you so much for coming in and talking to us about the problems with our healthcare system, the dismantling of public healthcare, and I do hope to have you back. Finishing off with a bit of Glenn Love, The Rain in Naples from his Cheetah EP. And then after that, we're going to PLIC with The Piano Show starting at noon. You've been listening to CKMS FM Radio Waterloo on the FM dial at 102.7. This is the CKMS Community Connection Show. My name is Bob Jonkman. Thank you, Jim Stewart. Thank you, Rihanna Duet. See you next week, Monday.
You are listening to CKMS 102.7 FM Radio Waterloo, broadcasting from Waterloo, Ontario.